before we start to do any painting, I just want to quickly run you through some tips and tricks to help you get the most out of your paints and also your paintbrush too. Now the first of these is that the paintbrush comes with a cap to keep the bristles nice and safe. And when you're using it to paint, remember you don't need to have loads of paint on your brush. In fact, you want to avoid getting any paint onto the metal bit of your brush. So for example, you can see with my blue paint, I haven't got too much there, that's about the right amount. Now also notice that I'm holding my paintbrush like I would a pen, so I've got lots of control, and it's a good idea to brace your elbows on your table to get nice and comfortable and keep your hands steady so you can get to all of that detail on your miniature. Now these paints are water-based, so you need some water to clean your brush, and it's a good idea to have some cool water, don't have hot water, and just give your brush a good shake in the water to get all that paint out of it. Now also, don't leave the paintbrush standing in the water, because if you do, you'll bend the bristles and ruin your brush. So instead, just make sure it's dry and then put it flat on the table. And when you're done painting for the session, put the cap back onto it. But with all those basic tips out of the way, we can now get on with some painting. Orcs are aggressive feral creatures that love nothing more than to fight, which makes them a match for any space marine. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint one using the Battle for Vedros paint set, and we're going to be starting out with the black paint, which is called Imperial Primer. Now it's always important with all of your paints to give them a good shake before you use each colour and make sure the lid's firmly closed as well. And that's especially important with this paint, which is a little bit thicker than the other ones. And what I recommend you do is get a hold of something to use as a palette, and it's up to you what you use for this. You could use some cardboard, or you could use an old plate or an old tile. It's entirely up to you, but having this allows you to get some of this paint and put it onto your palette, and then you can add a little bit of water to it, because the paint can be a little bit too thick straight away. So if you add some water to it, it thins it down, means it goes a bit further and gives a nice smooth finish on your model as well. So once you've got that mix ready, all you've got to do is get some of this paint loaded on your brush and just start painting it onto your orc. Now what makes this paint special is that it's really good at sticking to plastic, which makes it an ideal first step for all the other colours to apply to make them all bright and strong. So what you need to do now is work all the way around that grey plastic, working this paint into all the little details. And if you do still see any grey plastic showing through when you're done, just apply a second coat in exactly the same way. The orc is now completely black and we're ready to start adding some colour to the model. Now if you have a look on the inside flap of your Battle for Vedros paint set, you'll see there's a little guide in there, and we're going to follow through these steps now as we carry on painting our orc. And the first colour we're going to use is the brown colour, and this is called Mournfang Brown. Now I'm going to be applying this once again by using my palette first of all to control exactly how much of this paint I've got, and then I'm going to add a little bit of water to it to thin it down, and then make sure I don't have too much paint on my brush. Now it's a good idea to hold your brush like you would a pen. This gives you lots of control. Just get rid of the excess paint, so you've got a good tip on there, and when you're ready, all you've got to do is start painting the brown areas of your orc. Now the kind of things we're looking for here are the trousers, the braces, and also the belly strap as well. And as you're doing this, just be really careful to leave black things like the belt that we want to keep black. Once you finish painting all of those brown parts, the next thing to do is to start painting all the silver parts. So we're going to use our silver paint now, which is called Lead Belcher. And this is going to be for things like the armour, the weapons, and also a few smaller details, things like buckles and that kind of thing too. So I'm going to get my paint ready just as we did previously. And when it's at that sort of consistency there, you don't have too much on your brush, just start applying it to the parts that you want to be silver. And these parts are all over the miniature, so if you're not sure which bits to do, then just have a look at the picture inside the painting guide, and that will give you a great idea of the kind of things that you're looking for here. And if you can still see some of that black showing through once you've applied this colour, just apply a second coat in exactly the same way. The silver parts are all painted now, and we're ready for the next colour, which is an unusual paint, this one. It's the really watery black paint, and this is called Nuln Oil, and it's actually designed to run into all the details on your miniature, so you'll see what I mean as I start applying it. Like normal, it's a good idea to use your palette to control exactly how much of this is on your brush, so just make a little puddle of it, get a good amount on there, and what you're looking to do is to paint this over all the parts that you've done silver and brown so far. Now I'll start on the gun, and you can see what I mean about how it runs into the detail. As I paint it on there like that, see how it runs into the lines there between those panels? Really starts to bring out all that detail and add depth to your miniature. So all you need to do now is carry on painting this on all those brown and silver parts, and give it a little bit longer to dry than normal, because it does take a bit longer than the other paints that we've used so far. The Nuln Oil is now completely dry, and we're ready for the next colour, which is going to be to start to paint the orc's skin. Now we're going to begin with the darker of the two greens that you get inside the paint set, and this one's called Warflesh. And what I'm going to do is use my palette in the same way that we have been doing so far to get some paint on there, then add a little bit of water to it to thin it down so it's going to apply nice and smoothly to the miniature. And once you're ready, all you've got to do is start painting this onto the skin of your orc. Now when you do this, just be aware that you might need to apply a second coat to build up to a nice strong green when you finish, Whatever the case, be sure not to put on too much at once so you don't obscure all that detail, especially on the orc's face. The skin is now completely green, but it is quite dark, so what we're going to do now is move on to the lighter of the green paints that we've got. This one's called War Boss Green, and what we're going to do here is something a little bit different as we apply this to the skin. So you need to use your palette as we have been doing so far to get your paint mixed and ready. So you're looking for it to be a bit like that. Make sure there's not too much on your brush. And this time what you're looking to do is to paint the green areas that you've done, well most of them, but avoiding the areas where the detail is more recessed. So for example around the face, you can see the eyes are sort of set into the head. So what I'm going to do is just avoid them and paint around them like this, follow the eyebrows and things, just to really bring out all the features of the skin there like that. You can see now the face is really starting to jump out. Now on the muscles and the arms, it's basically the same thing. So for example on the arm here, what I'm going to do is start painting this part of the muscle because it's raised up, and then the little recessed line in between it, avoid that and start painting on the other side there like that. So what I need to do now is just carry on doing this over all of the green skin. With that lighter green applied, you can see the skin's now looking much brighter and all the details of the orc are standing out nicely too. And now ready for the next colour. And this is going to be for all things like teeth, claws and any horns and skulls if the model happens to have them. Basically anything that's bone. And for this we're going to be using the lighter brown colour, which is called Zandri Dust. Now these details are often quite small, so for this stage you do need to have lots of control over your brush for it. So remember to get your paint ready in the usual way, and then it's just a matter of painting these areas in. And I'm going to start on the teeth on this orc here, and you see I'm just being really careful as I apply this colour. And you might find you need a second thin coat to really build up to a nice strong finish. But it's important you keep those coats thin to keep all the details nice and sharp. With all the bone painted, the model's well on the way to being finished now, and the next thing we're going to do is add another metallic colour to it for all the gold parts. So we're going to use our gold paint now, which is called Balthazar Gold. And well, it's entirely up to you really exactly which parts you paint with this colour. I'm going to be using it on the front plate and the back plate of the orc's armour, but if you wanted to, you could add it to some of the weapons, you could use it on helmets, it's really up to you. But whatever the case, you just need to get your paint ready in the usual way. And then once you've identified which parts you want to paint, it's just a matter of painting this on as neatly as you can, being careful around all those other details that you've finished so far. Once you're happy with the amount of gold that you've painted onto your miniature, the next colour to use is the other really watery kind of looking paint. This one's the reddish brown one and it's called Reichland Flesh Shade. And this we're going to be applying onto all the gold parts that you painted on to give them just a little bit of depth. So all you've got to do is get some of this ready and then apply it straight over those gold parts. And in this case, it's going to be that chest plate just there. But whatever the case, no matter what size area you're doing, just apply a good coat of this over the top. And there we are, our orc is almost complete. All that remains to do is to paint the base. Now for this we're going to be using the light brown paint, which is a very special paint. It's called a Grelin Earth and it's designed to crack as it dries to give the impression of a really dry, arid ground. Now because it does crack, you can see some of the base through it, so it's important that you make sure your base is completely black before you start this stage. So just use a bit of Imperial Primer on it if you need to. But with this paint it's well, a little bit different from normal because you don't need to water it down, so don't worry about putting it on your palette, just use it straight out the pot. All you've got to do is get a good dollop on your brush, find an open space on the base of your miniature and just put it on. And then it's just a case of moving it around, just being really careful as you get close to the feet of your miniature. Now make sure you put on plenty of this because the thicker it is, the bigger the cracks will be, and you want them to really stand out nicely. And once you have coated the top of the base with this paint, give it plenty of time to dry. I recommend you leave it for at least an hour. The Grelin Earth is now completely dry and you can see it's cracked and given us that fantastic arid landscape. And with that done, our orc is now complete. Now remember, even though the orcs do vary quite a lot in this set, you can still paint all of them using the same steps that I've shown you in this video. So have fun and enjoy painting all of your orcs.